So I want you to imagine that I'm 8 years old, I'm stood at my dad's feet after he's just taken an overdose, and I freeze. And then my first thought is, I can't phone an ambulance, because if I phone an ambulance, then my mum will know what I've seen, and she won't be able to deal with it. This might sound like an extreme situation, but children take responsibility for their parents' emotions all of the time, and most of the time the parents don't even know it's happening. Fast forward to more recent times. I'm in the kitchen and I've just had an argument with my daughter's mum, and my young daughter walks in and she hasn't heard the argument, but she can sense that something's happened, and she says something along the lines of, stop it, don't do that. And if I'm not emotionally available in that moment, I shut my daughter down. I say, don't worry, everything's fine, we're not arguing, don't be silly. And in those very few words, I teach my daughter not to trust the way that she's feeling, not to trust her body, and I set her off on her own path of emotional avoidance. All of a sudden, the 8-year-old boy stood at his dad's feet taking responsibility for his mum's emotions doesn't feel like such a rare occurrence. It feels like something that could happen in every single home, potentially every single day. This is what I mean when I say children take emotional responsibility for their parents. And it's one of the most common forms of dysfunction that we never talk about. I appreciate that my experiences were extreme. Ever since I can remember, with my dad's alcoholism, I was hypervigilant. I could tell you how drunk he was by the sound of his breath, by the volume of the TV. I could tell you how drunk he was by the way he put the key in the door. And I would lay in bed at night thinking about that. And the next morning, my mum would be frantically trying to act like everything was okay. She'd be saying, this isn't your fault. I don't want you to worry about this. Your dad was just a bit angry last night. And then she'd say something like, you're okay, aren't you? And when my mum said, you're okay, aren't you, she wasn't seeking to create a space for me to explore my emotions. Emotionally, my mum was full, and she was looking for me to validate her need for me to be okay. And as a young boy, I sensed and knew that. So I pushed my emotions down into my body, and I showed up for my mum in the way that I thought she needed me to be. None of this was because my mum was at fault. She wasn't a horrible person, but we were under the stress of the extreme situation that we faced in a society that wants to sweep difficult emotions under the carpet. The same happened when my dad went to prison. Nobody sat me down and said, how do you feel about this? Do you want to visit him? Nobody let me ask whether my dad would even want me to go and see him. We just went. It was horrible. It was hard. We left and we pretended that it never happened, and we never spoke about it again. I was slowly being taught that when you experience big, difficult emotions, you push them down into your body and you show up for the way that you're supposed to be. It's what society wants you to do. Society promotes this idea of bravery, not emotional expression, but bravery. That's what they did to me at my dad's funeral. I'm 8 years old. Most adults are telling me to be brave. Some adults are telling me to be brave for my mum. And if you break that down, what they're literally saying is, your mum's got enough on her plate, don't you bring your emotions too. So I became a brave little boy. By the time I'm 11 or 12, I've learned the deal. If people ask me about my dad, I say he died a couple of years ago, yeah? And then I say something along the lines of, but at least I had a dad. And all the adults around me like, wow, look at this emotionally mature child. What great perspective at such a young age. But that's not what was happening. I was emotionally suppressing, pushing my emotions down into my body and showing up for the way that the people around me wanted me to be. So why does all this matter? Yes, my dad was an alcoholic, but I actually think that a functional family doesn't even exist. I think it's a sliding scale that we all sit on. At one end, there is these sort of toxic and abusive parents, but somewhere in the middle of this scale, I think it's the biggest pool of people where most of us sit, and it's emotionally unavailable parents. And I ain't here to point fingers or to start to blame them, but unless we start to stand up and take accountability for our emotions today, our children will continue to take responsibility for them. See, my problem wasn't what happened to me. The problem was that no emotionally available adult sat with me long enough to understand that it wasn't my fault. Because that's what children do. When nobody helps them understand the extent of their experience, they'll make up a story and they'll make themselves responsible for what happened to them, because then at least that gives them the illusion that they can work towards a solution. They'll do what I did. I thought if I could just be good enough at school, maybe if I could support the right football team, get good enough at football, maybe my dad wouldn't need to drink in the way that he did. Maybe I wouldn't see my mum cry so much. The brain develops at the fastest rate in those initial years. We know that that brain develops based on the environment. How many children in our society today's brains are developing based on the idea that they are responsible for all the bad things that happen in their life simply because there's not enough emotionally available adults to help them understand that their emotions make sense and don't want to sweep them under the carpet? But this is not a personal issue. It's a systemic one. There's 1 in 5 children that are living with a parent in the UK that drinks hazardously. Hazardously is enough to harm the other people around them. But this isn't limited to alcohol. It's not limited to addiction. Emotional avoidance is baked into Western culture. I would argue that the mental health solutions that we're often given are still just emotional avoidance again, packaged up in toxic positivity and more silver linings. When the truth is too painful for people to bear, they will opt for emotional avoidance. I would argue that the mental health epidemic that we talk about today is actually childhood emotional neglect in disguise. And the reason that's happening is because there ain't enough emotionally available adults around to be with the children in their difficult emotions today. I see this pattern all of the time. Work long enough on any personal development with an adult, and you'll find an inner child that hasn't been safe enough to be able to fully express their emotions. And we're all doing it. I'm guilty myself. I'm a parent. I've got loads of kids. But I'm a parent myself, yeah, and I let my children down all of the time. Let me give you a current example of what I mean. One of my children, my son, he's very much like me, so he gets emotional very easily, gets overwhelmed very easily. And I remember one time when he was young, he came to me and he said, I feel like everyone in this house would be better off if I wasn't here. And when he says that to me, I'm like, son, you don't have to think like that. I love you, man. I think you're great. Everybody loves you. I love watching you play football. You love watching me play football. You don't have to think like that. And in those very few sentences, I can completely devalue his experience. Now, I used to say the only reason that I would do that is because I'm his dad, I love him, and I want everything to be okay. All of those things are true, but that is not why I hit him straight with positivity. If I push myself a little bit harder, the reason I truly hit my son with that toxic positivity that I'm talking about there is because when he says, I feel like everyone in this house would be better off if I wasn't here, I can't deal with the way that it makes me feel. So when I say everything's going to be all right, you don't need to think about that, it ain't even about him anymore, it's about me. What my son needs in that moment is for me to step into his darkness and sit for a while. Not to fix him, not to change him, but so that he might feel heard in his experience, understand that he's a human because he feels it, and know that we can work through it together. Children will always have hardship. But if we can find a way to help people be with them in that experience, then at least when they experience that hardship, they'll grow as a result of it. They won't start to feel that they're responsible for it all of the time. What would happen if we were there for all of the children? What would happen if we started to surround all of our children with emotionally available adults? What can you do when you leave here today to make sure that next time that a child is around you and they have big emotions, you won't stand in the light saying, come over here, it's way better in the light. You'll step into their darkness and you'll be with them. And if we start to do that, we can really start to create change. This isn't a story about blame. It's a story about accountability. When I was 24 years old, I decided to stop drinking and using drugs, and I set myself on my own journey of emotional accountability to try and break the cycle. I went from being 17,000 pounds in debt on a fold-out bed in my mum's living room, planning my own suicide, to living a life beyond my wildest dreams. And sure, there's been a bunch of amazing things, material things that have come to me in that time, but you want to know my biggest success in life? My children still call me. And we laugh together, and we cry together, and we know that we can have big emotions. Imagine a world where we all did this. Imagine a world where we all turned up for our children emotionally in that way. And again, I want you to think about what you can do when you go away from here to make sure that you can. And I'll tell you that I think one of the best things that you can do is work on your emotions today so that you can be with the children in theirs tomorrow. Nobody remembers my dad. My children don't know who he is or who he was. We don't remember his birthday. We don't remember when he passed away. There ain't no pictures on the wall. I will have truly broken the cycle if in years to come, there's a child in a room somewhere that points to a picture on a wall and says, "Mummy, who's that?" And the mum looks back and says, "That's your great-granddad, Josh. And he was a good man." That's how we truly break the cycles. And if you want to break the cycle for the children of today, work out how to be present in your emotions now. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Thank you. Whew.